Play is the child's occupation. So use play as much as possible because not all the clients that you're working with, especially the kids that you're working with, are going to tolerate this very rigid kind of exercise. So you can incorporate the reflex integration exercises and the play-based one that we're creating here in RITP in your session. Be as creative as you can be, but be very precise and picking which one that you're working on to address the goal that you're trying to target. Hello, everyone. Welcome to RITP podcast. This is Kokeb McDonald, your host. Today, I wanted to talk about how to bridge functional skills and reflex integration work. So, you've learned the reflex patterns, you know the theory, but how do you translate into meaningful functional OT sessions? Today, we're going to bridge that gap so you can confidently connect what you know to what you do in the clinic. So many therapists can identify, retain reflex patterns, but they get stuck figuring out how to address them within the treatment sessions. As OTs, we work on functional skills, activity of daily living, play, social skills, and so on. So how do we figure out how to address functional skills, even though we're also targeting reflex patterns that are showing up in the clients that we're working with? So, without a clear bridge between the theory and practice, therapy can feel disjointed or ineffective. I see some therapists just putting a goal saying like, integrate ATNR or integrate the motor reflex, but they cannot really connect that to the functional skill the child is struggling because of that reflex being retained in the body. So functional goals sometimes get lost when activities are selected based on just reflex integration. So in this podcast, I wanted to talk about some ideas and give you some tips into what to do in your session so that you can address functional skills. First, link the reflex pattern to specific goal and functional skill activity of daily living or outcome that you're working on. Identify how each reflex impacts daily tasks. For example, if your client has a retained palmar reflex or palmar grass reflex, most likely you'll be also working on fine motor task or handwriting or anything related to hand movement that the child is having a hard time. So if that is something they're working on and the reflex pattern that you're noticing is the palmar grasp reflex, the functional skill you're working on would be handwriting or fine motor skill. Make the connection explicit to the client that you are working with and the challenges that the child is facing, and also connect with other therapists that the child is working with or the parent. You can also discuss with the educator the main concerns that they have, and you can use the symptoms that the client is having, and you can reverse it and work on targeting the reflex pattern that influences that specific functional skill. The second one you can do is just mimicking or working on the natural developmental progression, the milestones that the child may have skipped or didn't do well or did incorrectly. Work on those developmental milestones, because by going back and working on those developmental milestone, you're targeting multiple things. You're targeting reflex integration that helps with that developmental milestone. You can also work on the foundational level that the brain body connection needs to have, the brain connection, right and left, front and back, all that connection that brain needs to have, the myelination and the connection with brain body that the child needs to have in order for the next level of skill to improve. So going back and building activities in developmental milestone order can help you address the goal that you're working on, but also follow the developmental progression. For instance, crawling before climbing or walking before running. Like, you get the picture, right? So you don't want to skip too much ahead in the developmental progression, whether in gross motor or fine motor. That makes it really hard for the child to develop well. So even though sometimes you feel like, oh, you're regressing, you're going back, trust me, going back and working on the developmental progression and the basics that the child needs to have will make the improvement or the goals that you're working on much faster. So I really encourage you to do that. Another one is to use a step-by-step exercise videos, and we recommend that. Of course, inside RITP, we have created a done for you home school programs, and these kind of activities really have been helping the clients that we're working with give them a good visual example for them to be able to mimic. Sometimes, even as therapists, there's sometimes in our body we're not fully integrated when we are teaching, we might teach it incorrectly. So having a video or an example that's really done correctly helps. And one, you don't have to rely on yourself all the time. From what I notice, even with myself, like I can really focus on observing the child instead of me doing the activities for the child. You can do it both ways. There's no right or wrong way of doing it, but I'm giving you an option that you can think about. And also, when you give that as a home program, embedding it as a home program, school program, that you're not relying on the team or the caregiver or the teacher to do it correctly to teach the child all the time. So you're actually giving them already done for you home programs or school programs that they can follow through. So if you don't have the RTP app, take advantage of that, check it out, and use that, embedding that as part of the activities that they're going to do so that when they're now with you, they can continue practicing and working on it, increasing the frequency, because what the brain needs is increased frequency for better myelination and growth. So I highly recommend to use that, something that is very clear for them to do. Another one is embedding reflex work into functional play. So instead of just isolating very rigid reflex integration work or sensory integration work that you're going to do, pairing them with more purposeful play-based approach that the child might feel like more let down and be able to work with you is highly recommended. Play is the child's occupation. So use play as much as possible because not all the clients that you're working with, especially the kids that you're working with, are going to tolerate this very rigid kind of exercise. So you can incorporate the reflex integration exercises in the play-based one that we're creating here in RITP in your session. Be as creative as you can be, but be very precise and picking which one that you're working on to address the goal that you're trying to target. So there's different ones you can pick, get the books, get the app have the exercise videos for you, and make sure that when you're embedding it, be very particular in which one you're working on to address the focused functional skill that you're trying to address. And that is the best way to do it. You can do obstacle course. You can have the child pick which one they want to do and then create an obstacle course for you and then join them. And that way you're playing, they're playing. But for you, part of the session, it's not just play. You're always using your clinical skills and assessing your child consistently. So I highly recommend that you embed play-based approach because most kids, actually all of us, really respond to play. And I highly recommend that. And then the last one is just practicing regular clinical observation regularly in each of the session, getting your clinical skill much better. But the more you observe, the more you're looking at reflex pattern, the way the child is moving in functional play, the better your assessment and understanding of these reflex pattern and the body look like. Try to always notice the different parts of their body moving and try to even quiz yourself. Okay, when the child is moving this way, or let's say they're climbing on the playground and then they're moving, try to assess s- how, in what way is different reflex pattern being triggered now and see if their body's responding that way. That takes time, but it is really doable. It is something that you have to practice, but really studying out the different triggers because every reflex has a sensory trigger and a motor response. And it's the same with everybody, unless some kind of brain body connection challenges. Sometimes you might see the wrong movement pattern appearing. Besides that, they are similar in all of our body, so you can rely on that for you to work on a motor coordination challenge. And that way, when the child is moving in a functional base, you start to notice that. Because sometimes when you're screening actively, you don't see reflex pattern. But when they are playing in a functional base, a more free play base, you can start to see several reflex patterns popping up. For the most part, people say, oh, this child is disorganized. But for you, as you improve your clinical skill, you start to notice reflex pattern and the client. So it becomes fun and it becomes more easier for you to create a treatment plan that is more measurable, trackable, and you're not confused all the time to see which one you're going to work on. And that way you can use that functional activity they're doing. That will be the goal. But now you know how to assess or screen for reflex pattern and not functional activity. I hope that makes sense, and I hope this is helping. If you have any questions or if you have a comment, leave a comment below. If you want to work with us or want to go deeper and learn with us or create a treatment plan that is trackable, repeatable, and measurable using our method, make sure that you go down to the link below here and learn more with us. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.